In this lesson, we're going to learn the various ways of importing our models or our assets into Unity, into our project, and how to work with them inside of our scene. So here we are inside of Unity, and I've just opened up my scene lesson 06 begin. So whenever we make a change in one of these scenes, I'm going to save it out inside of this subfolder. So if you want to open it up exactly what I'm working with, you can open this subfolder, or you can continue working with the DT demo level. Alright, so let's say we have an asset completed in our 3D application. Now we want to import it into our project. Well, there's many different ways we can do that. To begin with, let's take a look at the Assets, Import New Asset, which is also available from the right-click menu in our project folder. So Import New Assets, and it's going to ask us where. And inside of the Project Files folder, I've just created a new folder called External Assets. So we can open that up, and let's just begin by importing this cup Maya file. Again, you can import various scene files of these 3D applications depending on what Unity supports, which again you can find on their website. So if we click import, we can see here our cup is now inside of Unity. Now let's go behind the scenes and take a look at what really just happened. So we told Unity to import our cup. So here is our original cup file. Now what Unity has done is it's gone into the project assets folder, and it's simply copied the cup into that folder. So now we can of course move this where it needs to go, possibly our meshes folder, and now we can enter it into our scene by either dragging it into the hierarchy, which will place it at 0, 0, 0 depending on where that is. I believe that's let me check here, right there in space, or we can left click and drag this into our scene. Now this cup actually originally came in a little bit too large. So what I did was I actually edited our Fbx Import Settings. Most of the time in Unity, when you're beginning a project, you may import an asset and it's either far too large or far too small. Technically, inside of Unity, there's no real unit. It's supposed to be not meters or not feet or not centimeters. It's just units inside of Unity. However, the one change for that, or the one sort of gotcha, is that the physics is 1 unit is equal to a meter. So if we take a look at our player controller here, this is supposed to be 2 meters tall, or approximately 6 feet. So remember that while you're creating your game, that the physics of the world thinks that 1 Unity unit is going to be 1 meter. So again, if you've imported a mesh or your asset and it's too small, simply select your asset in your project panel, come over to the inspector, and down near the bottom we have this Fbx Importer. And depending on which software you're using, it's going to use a different importer. For most of the Autodesk softwares, it's going to be Fbx. And what we have is a scale factor, and by default it's set at 1. And if we keep it at 1 and hit apply, we can see our cups are incredibly huge. That's because in Maya we modeled them to a different scale. So this is a common problem when using assets from several different softwares, unless you of course lock down the scale in the software that everyone is using. So we can change this. So let's try 1/10 of the size and see how that looks. So we just need to change the value, hit apply, and now these are 10 times smaller. However, these are still pretty large, so I'm actually just going to continue to decrease this, and I think the value I had it was about 0.03, and that gives us a nice cup size. So again, you can modify the asset by selecting the asset in the project, and every single game object connected to that asset will update. You'll notice that we have 2 cups in here, but by just changing the asset from the project, we were able to update everything at the same time. Now if we hit play initially, we'll see the cups inside of our scene, but they're not going to stop our player, or they're not going to collide with our object. To get these working, or to get these in the physical world, we can either add a collider component, or one of my favorite features of the Fbx Importer is this generate colliders. So let's just turn this on and hit apply. Now we're going to see a lot of options in here, and of course many of these are very important to importing your asset correctly. But for the most part, we can set the scale factor, set if we want colliders, and then we can continue worrying about these later on when we begin working with the animations or the materials or the normals. Now that we've set it up to collide, let's hit play again, and if we move forward, we can see that we are now interacting with these cups. So I can stand on it, I can move into it and hit it. Now, of course, for cups, we probably don't want to have our player completely be moved by a styrofoam or whatever cup, but that option is in there for very quickly and easily adding colliders, and it's what we use for quite a large part of these objects in this level. Now that was just the first way we can import assets. So again, that was the edit, import asset, or excuse me, the assets, import new asset, or the right-click menu. We can also directly drag and drop this from our folder structure into the project panel. So let's say we have this new cryopod closed. We can left-click, drag and drop this into a specific folder. Let's say we want this in ceilings, and Unity is going to go in, copy that file to the correct folder, set up all the connections for us, and our new object is ready to go. Again, if we look at the assets and go into wherever we dropped it, that folder, or excuse me, that file has been copied into that new location. And again, all we need to do to include it is to put it into our scene. And this is, as we can see here, a little bit too large. And inside of Unity, we've actually scaled down this object. But again, we can fix this in the asset so we do not have to worry about it anymore. So for this new cryopod, let's change the scale factor from 0.01 to 0.0061, which is just sort of what works within the scene. Once we hit apply, our object is updated and now works in the scale we have. So again, that's another way we can import assets, dragging it and dropping it directly into the project wherever we want it. Now the last way is just dropping it into the assets folder wherever we want it. Now you'll recall in an earlier lesson I said never mess around or never change the assets folder because we can break things, and that is 100% true for objects that are already in here. However, if we're needing to import new objects, we can just copy those into the new location we need. So if we need a new folder in here, I'm just going to come over to my project and let me right-click, create a new folder. So let's call this our new assets or our new meshes. And if we wait a second, this will appear in our assets folder. What we can do now is just left-click and drag these as many assets as we want into this folder, as well as the textures or whatever other files we have. And once they're all copied in, click back to Unity, and it's going to come in, and if we just hold on for a second or right-click and hit refresh, Unity is going to process all of these files that we copied in, and now they are all ready to be used here inside of our scene. So as you can see, several different ways to get the external assets into your Unity project and ready to get going. So depending on your workflow and your preferences, you can use any of these various ways to import assets into your scene, or excuse me, into your project and begin working with them. So in the next lesson, let's take a look at how we can move, manipulate, and edit the components of our game objects. We've already been doing it a little bit, but let's take a really formal look into how we can now change things in our scene view.